All right.
Okay.
Yeah, more like that, but it's cool that you did this last week with the kids, kind of like, I'm not there.
It all works. Put a red anchor on my head.
Maybe we'll find one car. I don't think how you left it, cell phone.
My wife is texting.
Well,
We
alright.
don't.
Which area are you farming?
Like her standing talking is.
So you don't have like.
Why?
Uh-oh.
I'll see. That's good. Like you're talking. With no warning, no. I'm 66, right? Yeah, we had no friends on a Charlotte. It's fucked out with my doctor.
You're leaving?
So, hopefully everyone knows where we are going to get our contracts.
One that's small.
It's gonna be CAR.
Okay. All right, just let me know.
I gotta start, guys, because we're late. All right, so CAR.org is where we are getting our contracts from. So no matter where you are in California, you're gonna join a local board. And then when you join the local board, you will become a member of CAR and NAR automatically. And CAR is where our contracts are. So I'm gonna log in here to CAR to get our contracts. Now, there's two different ways to get your contracts from CAR. You can do this online and keep all your transactions in the cloud. You can also download zip forms software. I would suggest that everybody download the software and install it locally on your computer. The reason is that sometimes the cloud's not working, or the servers are down, or they're getting backed up, or you might be in an area that has no internet connection, right? You're on vacation, there's no internet, or you need to go to the business office in order to get internet briefly. So if you have the downloaded zip form software, you can work on everything that you need. And then once it's ready to get signed, then you can go and hook up the internet and just send it through DocuSign to get signed. So there's a big advantage to having the zip form software installed locally. If you don't have it installed locally, I can help you with that. So don't worry.
What is this CAR?
So CAR is California Association of Realtors. That is California. So you have to join a local board. So our local board here is Greater Los Angeles Association of Realtors. It used to be called Beverly Hills Greater Los Angeles Association, but they dropped the Beverly Hills name for some reason. I guess they wanted to be more inclusive. But you know, it doesn't matter. You're going to join a local board anywhere, and then that local board, when you join it, you're automatically a member of California and national.
JJ, this form is updated or?
Okay, great question. Great question. So we're talking about how do we get updated forms, right? If you go on CAR.org in the cloud and you pull up a form, it will always be the most recent form because it's in the cloud. So if
Where do you get the form in here?
so we're gonna no, it's good, very good. We're gonna get there. So you will always have the most recent form in the cloud. When you are using the desktop software, every time that you open the desktop software, it's going to connect to the cloud and do a search, have any forms been updated? And you'll get a pop-up on your screen that says, there are new forms, would you like to download them now? And then you have the option yes or no. What also happens is when you work on your transactions here in the cloud and then you exit, when you run the local software, it's going to query the cloud. Have there been any updates to transactions? So it's checking for, are there any updates to forms and have any transactions been updated? And then it will automatically sync between your local software and the cloud. You'll always be working on the latest version of your form that you've been working on. If you work on something locally, when you press save, it automatically uploads to the cloud. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. You can go back and forth. Okay, so right now I'm going to log into zip forms here. So I've signed in. Now I'm going to go to the transaction area where the forms are. So just remember when you're in here, just remember you're going to go transactions, transactions, transactions. So this first bubble, it says transactions. So I'm gonna click on that one. And then down here, it says transactions again, access now. Then it's gonna validate me. And I'm gonna go again to transactions. So continue to transactions. All right, so this takes me to my transaction dashboard. All right, transactions. So every time I do a transaction, I give it a name, usually the property address. So I would do that by pressing on here, new. And today we're gonna be talking about leases. So I'm gonna say new lease. And the name for this class is seller leasebacks. So I'm just naming my transaction, seller leasebacks. And it's residential, active, none of this really matters. This is just for categorizing stuff over here. So that's fine. Residential, active, fine, saved. Now I have created, rent-free tenant screening is required. Do I want to do rent-free tenant screening? This particular transaction. Let's talk real quick about that, because that was a question. What is rent-free? What is rent-free tenant screening? So here's the story. If you have a tenant, you need to run their credit. Right? I used to, in the olden days, have to subscribe to a company, a private company that could run credit for me. Right? So I would pay a subscription fee, and then I would log on to that company's website, and I would enter the person's name, I would enter their social security number, their current address, their birth date, and then I would pay $30 or $35, and then I would run their credit. So there's a company called RentSpree that will do this for you. It's no subscription fee charged to you. And they are associated with our MLS. So from our MLS homepage, you can sign up with RentSpree. Now, if a tenant comes to me and they're interested in a property for lease, I will say to the tenant, I'll send you an application. So I log on to RentSpree and I send them an application through RentSpree. They're going to get an email from RentSpree that says, click here to fill out an application. And it's going to say, enter your credit card, $39.99. They're going to pay, I'm not paying. And then they're going to fill out the application, and then it's going to include it's going to have an application, it's going to have a credit report, it's going to have a background check if they have any evictions in their history. And it's going to have criminal background, it's a full background check. So
What if they have like
I did a credit check a few months ago, and it came back with there were 2 criminal violations. And what were the criminal violations? Speeding ticket. So I had 2 speeding tickets show up on someone's report. But
let's say they had a real like
yeah, it'll show up now.
you can't in real estate you can't be like biased with that. So then what would you do?
As crazy as it sounds, California enacted something saying you cannot discriminate based upon criminal history.
Yeah, so then what would you do?
You have to base it upon financial. It's always okay for you so far to deny a tenant based upon financial. So if you're going to discriminate, it has to be financial. That's it. Discriminate. There's no discrimination. If you're going to deny, I'm discriminating based upon your ability to pay the rent, right? That's the only thing I can deny a tenant on. They don't have enough income. They don't have enough assets, right? What if they lose their job? Will they still be able to pay the rent? So if you get a real crazy person and they have plenty of assets and a good income, you might be in trouble. Like they might sue you for discrimination if you don't accept them, right? So
You would automatically accept that?
I'm saying automatic, but like it's a real problem. If you get a real nut that comes in your property
That's what I'm asking.
and they have assets and they have income and you're denying them, your landlord could get in trouble. Like, yeah. It's a possibility. Anything's possible in California.
It's anything of your criminal record too? It's like anything. Because
You can't deny based upon criminal history.
yeah, I saw that and I was like, what?
California. Welcome to California.
Yeah, but like
All right, so I'm okay. So basically, it's asking me here on if I want to have RentSpree tenant screening involved. I don't know. Oh, I really don't know why this is here right this second. Let's just, the information box. Make tenant screening simple. Check the box and we'll email you a link that can be shared with applicants. So this is interesting. Our MLS is a partner with RentSpree. We can sign up from RentSpree through our MLS. RentSpree has also gone directly to CAR. Right? And we don't even need to go through RentSpree through the MLS. RentSpree has actually contacted CAR and said, every lease contract through CAR, we'll send your listing agent a link that they can sign up for RentSpree. So that's pretty cool. All right. So meanwhile, I'm just gonna press save. Now I'm gonna add some documents to my transaction. So I'm gonna press here documents. There are no documents yet in my transaction. Now, today's class, yesterday we talked about leases. We talked about lease listings, right? So it's very easy to get a little lease listing. If you're going to make a business out of this, it's very easy to do. Now, there's not a lot of money in leasing. It's the fastest money you can make in real estate. You can have nothing going on right now. You meet someone that wants to rent, take them to a property, they like it, you send them a rent-free application, you send that application to the listing agent, and what do you know? They're approved and they're moving in, they're making out their rent check. They're making out the landlord check and the commission checks. You're getting paid in a matter of days. It's the fastest money you can make in real estate. Now, you need to do a lot of leasing. I mean, honestly, you can do high-end leasing and make good money. I was just helping someone last night with a contract. She was making $5,100, not bad, on an $8,500 a month lease for 1 year, 5%, $5,100. Not bad. Okay. So if you do 4 or 5 of those a month, okay. So why do I say it's easy? Because you can drive around here and see for lease signs that are not on the MLS or not by realtors. And you can just call on the sign and say, hi, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, Miss Landlord, would you like to advertise your property in the MLS? That's it. And this is how it works. And that's it. That's your list. It's very easy. Would you like to?
How do you find the people to?
You have to drive around and just see the sign. Oh, once you're in the MLS, you're gonna have tenants calling you.
Okay.
When you put a property in the MLS, it's gonna be posted on apartments.com, Zillow, it's gonna be everywhere.
Yeah.
So you can do like leases and sell real estate, like
100%.
houses at the same time.
Yes,
Not like you.
yes, we buy, we sell, and we lease. Homes and condos, land. This office also does commercial. We have a very strong commercial department here. So that's also something you can do. The only thing we don't do is houses on wheels. We don't do RVs. Right? We don't, if it's not on wheels, then we can sell it. But if it's on wheels, we don't do that.
JJ posting MLS is free?
MLS is, well, when you say free, you pay every 6 months,
I know.
so you're paying.
Okay.
You can list unlimited properties for the same fee that you pay every 6 months. Right?
So if you call someone, you see their number
Yeah,
that,
you see their number and say, hi, would you like, this is JJ Wallack, Keller Williams, Beverly Hills. Would you like to advertise your property in the MLS?
and then you put it on the MLS
Yeah.
and then everyone calls you, like they're not gonna call a different agent.
Correct. I'm gonna put my sign in the front and I'll be the listing agent.
Okay.
And then tenants will say, can I come see the property? And then hopefully I'm sending them an application and then the landlord approves them. And that's it. When I say that's it, there's hours of work involved. I mean, right, because here we're filling out contracts now, so you have to go through the application really carefully, fill a lease contract. By the way, a lease contract is one of the most powerful contracts in real estate. It's such a strong contract. If you sell a property, if you sell a property and there's a tenant in a property and they have a lease, you can't break it. Like an owner cannot say, well, I'm buying it for myself, I'm kicking you out so I can move in. Not if there's a lease. A lease is a contract, that tenant is staying until the end of the lease. When an owner has the option to occupy is when they're month to month. Then an owner will have the option to occupy. But
Value,
uh,
property value.
What does that mean though?
so just real quick about owner occupy. When an owner says leave, I'm moving in, there are laws that California has put in place or rent control to, because they don't want people just kicking out the lowest paying tenant. Obviously, everyone wants to kick out the lowest paying tenant. You can only you have to pay relocation fee. And you have to you can only relocate the person who's the most recent tenant. And usually the most recent tenant is the one paying the highest amount of money. Right? So you can have to pay them relocation and you're kicking out the highest paying tenant.
So if someone's month to month, like let's say
And they have first right of refusal when you put it back on the market for rent.
if you have a lease and then like, let's say you have a 1 year lease and then after your 1 year lease, you do month to month. So they can, if they wanted, hypothetically, they can be like, you gotta leave. Can they do that?
If a buyer says, I want to occupy, a buyer can, if they're gonna occupy as their primary residence, one of the units in an apartment building that they're buying, they can pay relocation to the most recent tenant that just moved in. As long as their lease is over. If someone has a lease that hasn't come to the end yet, you can't break that lease.
What if it's a month to month lease and it's like nobody can buy it because it's not like condo?
No, people buy it. Investors buy property.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Investors love that. They'll buy 2 units, 3 units, 100 units.
Uh,
So all property that is livable space is residential property. The loan changes to commercial once it's a 5 unit or more. But the property itself is residential. So if you can have a 2 unit, triplex, fourplex, duplex, right? Those are residential. 5 unit, 1,000 unit can all be residential. But the loan that the buyer is getting is commercial once it goes 5 units. So I can go to any bank and get a loan on a 1 to 4 unit. That's gonna be sold Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. But once I hit 5 units, that's no longer a standard loan. It's gonna be a
Yeah.
commercial loan. Right? So the Chase has a commercial department, Citibank has a commercial department. Right, but I don't think I can walk into Wells Fargo and get a 5 or more unit.
That means that, okay, so like 5 different,
Five apartments in one building, or 6 apartments, one building. Now, also, once you have 16 units in an apartment building, there's different thing, 15 units or less, or 16 or more. Once you have 16 units, there needs to be a resident manager. Right? So, oh, by the way, we don't do management here. Like, if you want to do management, you're gonna have to talk to Michael Rosales, our broker, because we just want to make sure that the company here is not gonna get sued. Right, so that you need to sign something saying that Keller Williams is not liable for anything. Property management in itself is the whole business. If you're interested in property management, I would recommend UCLA, what do they call that? Extension. There's a great professor there. His name's Don. He's been a property manager forever. He's an excellent instructor. And he basically told me, he taught me that I don't want to be a property manager. Right, so, but if you want to do it, he's the guy.
Is it 15 units or 16 units?
Once you hit 16, you need a resident tenant. Yeah. All right, so we're talking about leasebacks today. Now,
And the big garbage dumps.
big garbage dumps. Yeah, well, that's part of the expenses of the building. So if you're a property owner, you have to pay the water. You're gonna have to pay garbage, gardening, that's it.
And JJ, is better invest for commercial with tenant or no tenant?
If you don't have a tenant, you're losing money.
Yeah, but. Okay. Because some tenant you don't know, they wanna.
Okay, so we have to have a conversation right now about sellers that want to stay past close of escrow. This is an important conversation because in California, it's very risky to have a tenant. The purchase contract, the way that it's written, is that you're gonna be delivered a vacant property. If you just don't change anything in the regular RPA, the regular residential purchase agreement, when you write an offer, it says you're gonna get a vacant property clear of all debris. And that's what the seller is delivering to you, a vacant property. There's a checkbox. Let's see, I'm gonna add the form now. So I'm gonna go here to all forms. I'm gonna go to residential purchase agreement. Let's actually look at a purchase agreement. Okay, so here's an offer, like we're writing an offer. So we have agency, you always have to have agency. What is an agent? Fair housing, can't discriminate. Possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, right? We can represent both sides. Home insurance is something we need to talk about in California. Let's talk about this briefly because when a seller becomes a tenant after close of escrow, they no longer have insurance for their stuff that's inside the house. Right? A buyer who's buying a property, the day of close, it's on them now. The buyer now has homeowner's insurance. The seller just lost their homeowner's insurance. Right? Does that make sense? They sold the property. Now they don't have homeowner's insurance. Only the buyer has homeowner's insurance now. We need to tell the seller that they're gonna have to have a renter's policy. So this is just something to keep in mind. We want to make sure the renter has a renter's policy, and we're gonna deal with that on the form, on the rent back form. All right, so here's a regular offer. We're writing a purchase offer. It's asked, there's a question here about time of possession. Okay, when are we gonna get the property? Upon notice of recordation. So that, in order to transfer ownership in real estate, that's done by a grant deed. The seller says, I, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, for valuable consideration, hereby transfer my property to Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, Mr. Buyer, Miss Buyer, whoever, the buyer, right? So it's gonna have the seller's name, it's gonna have the buyer's name. That grant deed, which is signed and notarized by the seller, escrow holds that grant deed. Okay? Escrow also collects the money from the buyer. So once escrow is in possession of all the money and they have the signed grant deed, escrow is holding both. Escrow is now going to give that grant deed to title. It's going to get recorded in the county recorder's office. Once that grant deed gets recorded, the property is now officially the property of the buyer. Okay, that act of recording transferred ownership from the seller to the buyer. Now, once that's recorded, escrow will pay everybody. They'll pay the seller their money and they'll pay off the loans and they'll do all that. So this contract says, when does the buyer get possession? Upon notice of recordation. So what I do as a listing agent, when I have a listing, I will have all the keys to the property in a kitchen drawer. And I'll have the front door key in a lockbox, in a combination lockbox on the property. When escrow calls me and says, congratulations, JJ, we recorded, I'm gonna first call my client and say, congratulations, thank you very much. I can eat now, thank you. And then I'm going to call the buyer's agent and say, congratulations, I just got confirmation from escrow that we recorded. Here's the combination to the lockbox on the property that has the key. You can meet your buyer there anytime or give them the combination. Because I'm not allowed to walk in there anymore, it's trespassing. Right, because it's now the buyer's property. The listing agent hired me to sell it, I could go in at any time. But now that it's recorded, it belongs to the buyer, I'm not allowed in that property. So I have a lockbox on the front of the property with a key, and I have all the other keys in the kitchen, in a drawer. And I tell the agent, I left all the keys in the drawer, there's the front key in there, you can meet your buyer there, wish them a congratulations, or just tell them the combo, up to you. Thank you for a great deal. Now, what happens if the property is occupied by a tenant? We're going to have to check this box down here, tenant occupied property, right? Sometimes you're gonna buy an investor, you're gonna have an investor client that's buying a property that has a tenant in it, right? Or there's a tenant in there that has 6 months left to live there. So then you're gonna check this box, tenant occupied property addendum. That's gonna pull up an additional addendum. All right, now let's look at this one. Time of possession, seller occupied. So if the seller is going to stay past the close of escrow, you're going to have to decide which box that you're checking here. There is a box for 29 or fewer days or 30 or more days. A very important distinction. Now, you're going to have sellers that need to take the money that they're getting from the sale in order to buy the property that they're going to. Right? It's going to happen all the time. A seller wants they want to buy this property over here, but they need the money from their property. So sometimes they can take a bridge loan, they're able to borrow money against this and buy here, but sometimes they need to sell this and buy the new property. In that case, they might need to close escrow and get the money and stay in the house a few days before they're able to purchase on the new property. Right. Now, here's the situation. We have 29 days or fewer or 30 days or more. What's the difference between these two? 29 days or fewer.
So
Yeah.
you're a tenant now, once
You're a
you're
tenant.
past 30,
So what's the
29.
the definition of a tenant
29.
is 30 or more days is a tenant. When someone's in a property 30 days, they are a tenant.
Seriously.
If you are staying 29 days or fewer, the buyer is giving something called a license to the seller. A license to remain in possession. Okay, so let's check the box. It's gonna add the form. Check this box too. We'll add that.
If you're 29 days or less, it's gonna be, you have a license.
Okay, so let's look at this. So
Yeah.
here's the form called 29 days or less. It's called a seller license to remain in possession addendum. The word tenant is nowhere in here. Right? This is a license to remain in possession. Now, I would think normally that if they stay past this time of license, that they're trespassing. And I could call the police and kick them out, right?
Mhm.
So last month I called the Beverly Hills Police Department non-emergency line. And I said, hello, I'm calling from Keller Williams, Beverly Hills. I have a question. If I have someone who's staying in a property for a week and they don't leave and they're not a tenant, they have a license to remain, but they stay past the time, will you come kick them out? And they did not say yes. They didn't say no, but they didn't say yes. They said maybe, I don't know. It wasn't a clear answer. So anytime you have someone staying in a property, it's dangerous for a seller. So keeping that in mind, I want to frame my license to remain or my lease back for 30 days or more. I want there to be a penalty in there somehow where the person that's staying, there needs to be an incentive, a very big incentive for them to move out on time. Or they will be penalized, right? That's what would make me more comfortable. I'm trying, so there's two things I want to accomplish in the lease back. I want to basically have a very high rent if they decide they're not moving out, an extremely high rent, that it'll be cheaper for them to move into something else cheaper. Right? And I also want to make sure that all the utilities remain in their name and maintenance remains their responsibility until they move out. Right?
You would know that they would wanna stay there, like they would tell you that.
Oh, this is a conversation.
Yeah.
So usually we're gonna have this conversation when the offer is first
Presented.
presented. So usually what'll happen is me as a listing agent, you're gonna represent a buyer. And you're gonna call me and you're gonna say, JJ, I have a buyer that is looking at another home. And they need to sell their house in order to buy it. And I'm gonna say to you, is that house under contract? Do they even write an offer on it yet? Or they got inspections on it? I'm trying to figure out where you are
Where you
on
at?
the new purchase. And then I need, yeah, I mean, everything has its own situation. So me as representing my seller, you might write an offer to me, and your property's not on the market yet. Your buyer's property that they need to sell isn't even on the market yet. So then I need to figure out how long am I gonna give you to put your property on the market and get a buyer, right? If we're in multiple offers, that's not happening. Like my seller is not gonna wait for you if there's 5 offers, right? So, but if you're the only person that we're dealing with, I'm gonna have a talk with my seller. Look, this is their property. I researched it. It's worth X amount of money, I think. And they're gonna list it at a certain, I wanna make sure that you list it at a price that's reasonable. If I'm gonna have my seller take their property off the market while we're waiting for you, I'm gonna recommend to my seller that we put in a contract that we're gonna accept your offer based upon you going on the market by such and such date at such and such price. I wanna make sure you're reasonable. What if you have a property that's $1 million and you're trying to get 1.2? Right? Why should people help them wait for you to try to get 1.2 if it's only worth $1 million? Right, so in my counter offer to you, I'll probably put that you're agreeing to put your property on the market by such and such date at such and such price.
But how would you know if the person wants to stay after?
Ah, okay,
That's-
now we're having a conversation. Okay, so now we're having a conversation of, now what are we gonna do
If,
about you buying that new property? Or my seller now that I'm representing. My seller is also buying a property, right? So you're selling something to buy this. My seller is also selling something to buy that. My seller needs the money that your buyer is paying in order to complete their purchase. So I'm gonna say to you, my seller needs to stay 3 or 4 days in order to get the money and complete the purchase, their purchase where they're going. Is that okay with you? And you're gonna say 4 days, sure, no problem, 4 days. I might say, you know what, maybe make it 6 days or 7 days, just so we have some room. Okay, so now we're talking about 7 days. Now we have to figure out how much money that 7 days is worth. Sometimes you're gonna give it for free, sometimes. That might be part of your offer coming to us. Right? So you're gonna, or let's see, I'm gonna try to negotiate for my seller that they get a free leaseback. Now, you're the one filling out this SIP. It's coming with your offer. So you're gonna say to me, keep all the utilities in their name until they move out. And that my seller is responsible for all the maintenance until they move out. You know, what would happen if, you know, it's really interesting. Like, I try to, if I'm representing a buyer, I really try to have, let's see, I try to have the seller responsible for maintenance. I don't want my buyer closing on a property and then the seller is calling my buyer to come replace a light bulb. Right? That's just crazy. Like, it's their house, right? So I make them responsible for utilities and maintenance. What happens if there's an earthquake during that leaseback period? So the person who has insurance is the buyer. Like, the seller can't deliver the house in that condition. But if there's a clog in the toilet or something happens like that, I do want the seller to repair that. The seller should be delivering the property in the same condition. Now, if it's a major issue, that's gonna be on the buyer's insurance. There's nothing we can do about that. But I do
it's like flooding.
flooding. So whose fault was the flooding? So again, if it becomes an insurance issue, the buyer has insurance, have homeowner's insurance. Now, I do want the seller to have insurance. So here, there is a clause here about insurance, and it says seller's personal property is not insured by the buyer, and if applicable, not by the owners association against loss or damage due to fire, theft, vandalism, rainwater, blah, blah, blah. Seller is advised to carry seller's own insurance. So I'm gonna make sure that the seller has an insurance policy, because it's not gonna be covered by the buyer. Totally normal, no problem. Other terms and conditions will be all utilities and maintenance to remain seller's responsibility until move out. Yes,
That was on a Band-Aid for them to have renters insurance. It's just saying we're not liable. Right?
correct. Now,
So you want to encourage them, but it's not required.
it's not required in this, it's not required. Seller is advised to
Got it.
carry their own insurance, right? If they don't get insurance for a brief amount of time, they're basically self-insuring, right? They're taking a risk. Now, on the RLAS, which is 30 days or more, there is something that we can look at about insurance. So here's the 30 days or more one. And here, it's gonna talk about insurance right here. So utilities, tenant agrees to pay for all utilities. All right, we'll make sure. There is gonna be an insurance paragraph where we're going to ask the tenant to have insurance. So let's see, insurance, here we go. Tenant shall obtain, so if we check this box, tenant shall obtain liability insurance in an amount not less than $1 million. Naming the housing provider as additional insured. Okay? So that's how we can protect our buyer, is having it go on their insurance first. Our buyer will have their own insurance policy. I have a landlord that I've represented multiple times on the same property, had a tenant, her tenant's dog bit somebody. Okay, my landlord's tenant's dog
Right.
bit somebody. The person that got bit sued the tenant and the landlord. And it went on the landlord's insurance. Okay, so now. If you, right, so now if you're gonna take a tenant with a dog. Make sure they have liability insurance and it's naming the property owner, right?
Any situation, not.
Now, on a specifically on a pet addendum, I'll just show you, on the pet addendum, they did change the pet addendum. So this is newer. Pets, okay, except as agreed to in the attached animal terms, so we're gonna check that box, look, it automatically adds it. Here's the animal terms and conditions addendum. So it says animal addendum agreement. The tenant represents the animal is a pet, that's fine. Tenant agrees, check this box. Tenant agrees to carry renter's insurance, which includes coverage for pet ownership. So just make sure if the person has a dog, even if we're talking about a seller, right? We're talking about a seller who already has dogs on the property. But we're trying to take the responsibility of liability off of our buyer, right? They're not our buyer's dogs. So just make sure that the person staying, they've notified their insurance company that they need a renter's policy. So,
You show me that form again, what's in animal?
so which one? So we have
The animal and then the animal,
animal addendum. So make sure that,
animal term.
no, this is just saying who the animal is. If you are representing a landlord and you're doing a lease, make sure that you name the exact pet. That's right. So like I just did this last night, I wrote here 6-year-old Labrador Retriever. Right, so there's not gonna be a mix-up of pets. A 6-year-old Labrador Retriever. If I go to the property 3 years from now, then there better be a 9-year-old lab there, right? Not a puppy.
Yeah.
So. Now, if you're in the rental business, your business is to maximize rents. Right? I'm a nice person, like, you know, I can get it, how you don't wanna raise rents on people, so you have these nice. Little old lady, little husband, the nicest people in the world, you don't wanna raise it. That's not, if you're in the real estate business, your job is to raise rents, that's your job. So if you're in the business of rental property, your job is to maximize rents. And in California, it can get tricky, you have to obey the laws, right? And it's very tenant biased. Yeah.
With owners in that situation, right, where they love their tenants, they've been here for
Yeah.
such a long time, where they don't wanna sell.
Yeah.
You're responding in a way with being patient with them, right?
What comes on my mind, landlords, owners that don't raise rents. I've seen people that have owned properties for 30 years and not raised the rents on any of their tenants. Their value of their property is maybe 1/3 of what it should be. So that they've harmed themselves and their inheritors.
So you're harming yourself and keeping.
Yeah, you're harming yourself because your property is worth less,
If he
because
wants, yeah, there's.
if I'm an investor and I have $1 million in my bank account. And I'm looking where can I put my $1 million where it's gonna get the best return? Would I buy your building with really, really low rents on every single tenant? Or I can put my money here and immediately get 5% or 7%,
Yeah.
right? Or would I buy yours and not get that? So. Now.
Decisions.
As an investor, I have a short-term and I have a long-term goals. The best thing I can do as buying income property, the best thing I can do is buy a property that has low rents. And if I can buy it at a price that makes sense with the low rent, that's exactly what I want. Because if I can when the rents go up, when people move out and those rents go up, my property just increased in value because it's now getting a higher rent. So I'm always looking for property that has low rents and I can buy it based upon the low rent. Now, what you'll see is on the MLS, agents will advertise the property and they'll price it based upon pro forma rents,
Yeah,
not the actual rents. They'll base it upon future anticipated rents.
Uh-huh.
So you have to be really careful. Are these right now rents or are these, you know, in your
What is the term?
wildest dreams rent?
What is the term? Performer?
Pro forma,
Or.
anticipated rents.
some young tenant, they say that they are just moved in, they are 30 years old. They are not gonna move out or they've been there for a while. How long do you anticipate for them to stay? Because decide if you want to buy that property based on the rent increase.
So whenever I'm analyzing a property and I'm looking at the leases, I'm looking who's named on the leases.
Thank you.
The worst thing a landlord can do is put. So let's look at a lease. So here's a lease. It says tenant, right? This is the person who's gonna be the tenant. And then it says premises are for the sole use as a resident. There's a difference between a resident and a tenant. If I have, I mean, this is the residential lease after sale, but the only difference is here it says seller. But I don't want to put kids as tenants. If I name a kid as a tenant, they could be there until they're 80. Yeah. So I don't want to name the kid as a tenant. I want to put the kid as an occupant
Oh,
in the occupancy area, permit for sole use by, right? And I'll put the parents' names and the kids' names.
Yes.
I want to put them on the tenant line. If I put them on the tenant line, I could have an 80-year tenant.
if they move, they die, they stay here.
Because I'm gonna have to pay them relocation. You know, when you look in Santa Monica and you see rents for $300 and something a month, $500 a month, that's what happened. Those are people that were very young. They've moved into a property in Santa Monica, and they've only had their rent raised 1% a year, 0.5% a year.
And they died, but if the parents moved out, they can be assigned.
There's the tricks. Yeah, you gotta be very careful of who you accept your rent check.
Right,
You
right.
gotta look at the name on that rent check. If it comes from someone that's not on your lease and you accept it, you might have just inherited a tenant without doing anything except cash it.
Yeah, I made a lot of mistakes. I mean,
Inherited tenant, made a tenant, yeah. Just regarding these two forms, just know there's a difference between 29 days or less, so license to remain. Oh, by the way, when I called the Beverly Hills Police and I asked them about that question, would you kick someone out? They also said to me that people that do Airbnb, like when the time starts getting closer to 30 days, they are getting calls.
They're getting what?
They're getting called.
So,
Like, it's really catastrophic for someone to let someone stay there 30 days.
So you start at 15 days, right?
They really try to get them out before they hit their day 30. Once someone is there at 30, it's gonna be a lot harder to get
To
them
get
out.
them out.
and
Oh, even if it's on Airbnb?
If you have an Airbnb for 15 days and they don't leave by day 17, you better start. Don't wait till day 18, 19, 20. Like start now to get them out. Once they're there 30 days, you're gonna have a problem.
but they're not at the tenant, you can use eviction they don't have any protection.
They will have tenant protection once they're
So before 30 days.
130, no, but
Huh?
the police are not so eager to get involved.
So somebody
You
can.
might have to pay cash for keys.
Yes.
Now, one thing I'm gonna do here is I'm going to say that the rent is $25,000 per month. Or it says for the term of the agreement, so this is. I'm gonna craft this in such a way that this is I'm gonna craft this in such a way where it's got a giant monthly rent. And then in the other terms, I'm gonna say, if tenant moves out by such and such date, that rent will be forgiven. Right? And not only that, I'm going to structure it so that money is held in escrow and not released to the seller.
Uh-huh.
So the seller is going to sell, they'll get their money, but there's gonna be a $50,000 chunk of money held in escrow until move out. And then I'll have something in here saying the rent's 25,000 a month, but the rent will be forgiven if they move out by a certain day, or this much will be forgiven of it. That way, if they stay, they're a $25,000 a month tenant, and I have $50,000 waiting in escrow. So there are ways to do this to protect your client, and that's how I would suggest it. So you guys are always welcome to come by my office when you're in the situation. We can talk it out. Every situation is good to be talked out. You know, I'll talk out the situation, and 10 minutes into the conversation, we'll either one of us will come up with an idea that maybe we should do it. Look at us for this. I also recommend going to other agents in the office and saying, how would you handle this? How would you handle this? And then, you know, whatever you think, whatever you like, and it makes sense to you, do it like that. So
Hi,
there's
JJ.
no one way to do it.
You can redo this amendment, obviously. It's a one-time deal. You get that and you can just,
So-
it's the reason they wanna stay because they
Yeah.
still need 50 more days. Then it will be obviously a tenant, but can you redo this so they're not a tenant anymore or not?
So this is a crucial time when someone makes their offer. It's a crucial time to get this paperwork done. When the offer is first made, we want to have all these conversations. There's gonna be glitches down the road. There always are. So, you know. If you want to
Sorry,
modify
JJ.
this, it just has to be agreed to by both sides.
So it could be more.
Yeah. As long as the buyer and seller agree, you can modify. And then that would be a form called modification.
Okay.
Right? So, yeah. So that's really it for this class, guys. And I'm not gonna get into the specifics here because I guarantee when it's time to do this, you're gonna be reading every single line of it. So there's no reason, because it's gonna be this scenario, that scenario, but just these are the main topics. Liability. Okay, so a seller will not have homeowner's insurance past close of escrow. That's gonna be on the buyer. But we want the buyer to have renter's insurance. And that policy should name the buyer as additional insured. If they have a pet, make sure you have a pet addendum. If there's a pool, make sure there's a
There's
pool,
a
make sure there's a pool addendum,
surrounding,
because the pool addendum will release liability,
yeah.
right? If someone, God forbid, drowns in the pool, right? So just make sure you have that.
Jeff, what's happened if somebody, you have a tenant, all of a sudden, you're in the middle of the tenant, you didn't get dog or you didn't get cat?
That's a 3-day notice.
What's the code? You can't amend it, you can't,
That's a 3-day notice. If they're not abiding by the terms of the lease, then you're gonna give a 3-day notice to quit.
oh.
if it's a service dog? And do anything.
Emotional support animal, that's why there's the pet.
They can come with any letter.
Right, that's the pet addendum, so.
It's true. It's not emotional support. And our property manager told us to do that too. She said, this is how you can wipe it from the red.
Yeah, I didn't even have to pay. My cat is an ESA from young, 3 years ago.
They can't even charge the
All right, you guys know more Lou by name. So.
Sorry, JJ, I just wanted to see if I could ask a question. It's Nagar.
Qualified
you?
for animal. You're allowed to ask someone what the animal is trained to do.
Wouldn't that be
There's a
more of a
difference
service?
between
You can't
service
ask
dog
for any.
But you can, yeah, there is a difference. Are you allowed to deny based on emotional support? I think you might be able to. Qualified support animal is trained to do a specific task to assist someone.
Mine was after. Yeah, that's like if you're going into a building or something, like they wouldn't
Right.
allow if it's.
Oh, you're talking about after.
After.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
Our property manager said, register them to wipe the pet fee that you're paying every time. And if you give her the document, she'll take whatever the monthly charge is for your pet. off.
Very interesting.
They did that for me. as
Hello,
well.
JJ.
They also have.
Yes, I hear someone online. Yes.
Hi, yes, it's Nagar. How are you?
One second. I'm sorry.
Hi, it's Nagar. How are you?
Hi, Nagar.
I just had a quick question. I wanted to know in the previous example, when you were talking about the tenant situation, not Airbnb, but in a tenant situation, let's say they had a 1-year lease and the lease has expired, so they're on a month-to-month basis. How would that come into play? I remember you said make sure you don't put like the kid's name on the lease. Once they become month-to-month, as opposed to still being in the lease, then what are the differences as far as the landlord's rights in a tenant situation?
So once a tenant is month to month, I'm just trying to make this. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
So once a tenant has stayed past the term of their lease and the landlord is now accepting month to month payments,
Yes,
terms of all the terms in the lease still apply. Right? But what's different now is if the landlord wants them to leave, they have to give 60-day notice. That's what changed. They have to give 60-day notice.
got it. Okay, perfect.
months,
Thank you
yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
Less than 30 days.
Yeah, the tenant always has the ability to give 30-day notice, but the landlord has to give 60-day notice.
Had tenant also do 60-day if they really wanted to.
The tenant can do anything, the tenant can give notice. I mean, we would love that. We would love a tenant to give
Give their
notice.
own
Usually
notice.
tenants don't give notice until they're already out. But, yeah, I mean, if a tenant gives notice, it gives the landlord the ability to clean the property up. Right?
Yeah.
Get prepared for the new tenant, start advertising it for lease. All right, guys. I mean, that's really it. I mean, really, when you're in this situation, come see me. We'll talk it out. I'll help you get through it. We'll do it. And there are, we'll get through it. So don't worry.
You want to announce the next week's Blaze class?
Yeah, let's look at what we got coming
No,
up.
it's not on there. AJ, go.
Oh, yeah,
Before everyone walks away, neuroscience.
Oh, you know what? It is Passover next week.
Neuroscience on Monday.
That's a Monday.
Everybody, please come. I have my friend. She didn't.
Right?
You're not.
You're-
She's coming on Monday.
When? On Monday.
This Monday.
Science.
I love that. Neuroscience. After
We have a neuroscience person coming Monday at
10 a.m.
10 a.m.
She's gonna be at the Josh.
Okay,
Paul.
okay, so we have fire coaching at 10 a.m. on Monday. We have a neuroscience person coming. So there's something called neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. And it's about reading body language. Really good when you're negotiating contracts or talking to a buyer or seller. You can pick up on their body language. So we'll get a lot out of Monday. I mean,
Mindset.
yeah,
It's
I mean, it'll blow your mind. Like, but I guarantee you will learn something that will help you in a future negotiation
Business.
in business.
Great for everything, honestly.
Yeah.
JJ, after fill the application. What's this, next month? Hold on 20 seconds. After fill the application, how can I send for this signing or I have to print it? How can I do that? For example, this. Okay, that's it.
That's it.
Just the minutes that are-
I really want to, like, before I'm done with my cooking, I will.